Hello and welcome to our news program coming to you live from Algiers on All 24 News with me, Karim Zachary. First, the headlines. Russia urges Ukrainian forces in the port city of Mariupol to lay down their arms and surrender in exchange for safe passage, but officials in Kiev immediately reject the offer. A shopping center in Kiev was left in ruins after being targeted by a Russian strike, killing at least one person. Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine, under an intense attack by artillery shells, mortar strikes and bombardment from the multiple launch rocket systems. Those were today's top stories. We kick off our news with some live updates on the Russia-Ukraine file. The head of European diplomacy, Joseph Borrell, denounces the destruction committed indiscriminately by the Russian army in the besieged city of Mariupol in Ukraine as a major war crime. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky compares Russia's military operation to atrocities committed by Nazi Germany during World War II during a address to Zionist lawmakers. In a tweet, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi said that 10 million people have now fled their homes in Ukraine due to Russia's devastating war. Russia has urged Ukrainian forces in the port city of Mariupol to lay down their arms and surrender in exchange for safe passage out of the town. But officials in Kiev immediately rejected the offer as out of questions. More with Zahra Farjani.
As it continued its barrage of the besieged city of Mariupol, Russia calls on Ukraine to lay down its arms and demands a written response to its ultimatum on Monday, in the name of safeguarding the inhabitants and infrastructure of the city of Mariupol. Russian Colonel General Mikhail Mizintsev said on Sunday that Moscow would allow two corridors out of the coastal city, heading east towards Russia and west to other parts of Ukraine.
As of 10 a.m. Moscow time, March 21, the Russian Federation will open humanitarian corridors from Mariupol to the east, and in agreement with the Ukrainian side to the west.
Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk rejected the notion, saying there can be no talk of any surrender or laying down of arms. She emphasized that they have already informed the Russian side. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Sunday denounced a new act of terror after the bombing of a school in Mariupol and said he wanted to negotiate directly with Vladimir Putin.
In the besieged city of Mariupol, a Russian plane dropped a bomb on an art school. People were hiding there from shooting and shelling. There were no military positions there. There were about 400 civilians, mainly women, children, and elderly people. They are under the rubble now.
The fall of Mariupol would allow Russian forces in southern and eastern Ukraine to link up, but Western military analysts say that even if the surrounded city is taken, the troops battling a block at a time for control may be too down to help secure Russian breakthroughs on other fronts.
A shopping center in Kiev was left in ruins and still partially on fire after being targeted by a Russian strike. The attack killed at least one person, according to the mayor of the Ukrainian capital. A huge blast shook the city during the attack, and fires were visible in the rubble of the Retroville Mall. According to British intelligence, Russian forces advancing on the Ukraine capital Kiev from the northeast have stalled more than 25 kilometers from the center of Kiev, as Ukraine rejected Russian calls for defenders to lay down their arms in the besieged city of Mariupol. Ukraine and its Western backers say Russian ground forces have made few advances in the past week, concentrating their efforts on artillery and missile strikes, often into urban centers. Ukrainian officials said Monday that emergency teams have contained an ammonia leak, a chemical plant that contaminated wide area in the eastern Ukrainian city of Sumy. Sumy Regional Governor Dmytro Jevitsky didn't say what caused the leak, which spread about 2.5 kilometers in all directions from the Sumy Kimprom plant.
In the city of Sumy, a planned provocation by Ukrainian nationalists, about which the Russian Defense Ministry officially warned a few days ago, was carried out overnight. According to the head of the regional administration of Sumy, an ammonia leak occurred at the Sumy Kimprom plant.
According to Oleg Senegobov, the chairman of the Kharkiv Regional Military Civilian Administration, Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine, is under an intense attack. The Russian forces fired 38 artillery shells, mortar strikes, and bombardment from multiple launch rocket systems on Kharkiv. The insight in this report by Sofyan Kinturi.
Head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Civilian Administration, Oleg Senegubov, announced that the Russian forces inflicted 38 artillery, mortar strikes and shelling from multiple launch rocket systems on Kharkiv. Senegubov said,
"Thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine, the Russians have significantly reduced their presence in the sky over Kharkiv. Today we are fixing reconnaissance aircraft."
Kharkiv was shelled from heavy artillery. The shelling killed at least 5 residents of the industrial district, including a 9-year-old child, as of the evening of March 19. Russian forces caused also death of 266. In addition, during the evening shelling of the industrial district, the colony number 43 damaged. According to Senegubov, yesterday morning the Ukrainian military destroyed the unit of sabotage and reconnaissance group that was trying to enter Kharkiv, striking with machine guns and small arms. Another unsuccessful attempt to break through the defenses of the Ukrainian army was made by Russian forces in the direction of Lysium.
Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov says for the second day in a row that Russia used hypersonic missiles in Ukraine, this time to destroy a Ukrainian army fuel reserve in the south of the country. Putin has called the Kinjal missile an ideal weapon given its speed and ability to overcome air defense systems.
From the water of the Caspian Sea, sea-based cruise missiles caliber, as well as from the airspace of the Crimea, hypersonic aeroballistic missiles fired from the aeronautical system Kinjal destroyed a large reserve of fuels and lubricants of Ukrainian armed forces near the settlement of Konstantinovka, Nikolaev region. From this base, the main supplies of fuel for Ukrainian armored vehicles were carried out in the combat zone of southern Ukraine.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calls for peace again and urges talks, saying negotiations are neither easy nor pleasant, but they are necessary because lives are at stake. Let's take a listen.
I'm sure you understand that negotiations are not easy and pleasant, but they are necessary because lives are at stake. Ukraine has always sought a peaceful solution, and what we want mostly today is peace, because we count every victim. For us, every family destroyed and every house ruined is too much.
According to Slovakia's defense minister, the Patriot air defense system has begun arriving in Slovakia from NATO partner nations, and the deployment will continue in the next days. The system will be operated by German and Dutch troops and will be first stationed at the Celiac airfield in central Slovakia to aid NATO's eastern flank defense. Soldiers, veterans, and even ordinary civilians have responded to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's call for volunteers to join his country's armed forces in an attempt to relieve the situation in Ukraine's cities, which have been besieged by Russian forces. Volunteers have shown their readiness to fight side by side with Ukrainian forces against the Russian military operation. The details in this report by Usama Ayadi.
On February 27th, just 3 days after the start of the Russian military operation on its bordering country, Ukraine, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky put out a call for foreign volunteers to join the Ukrainian armed forces, announcing the creation of an international legion. In recent days, the Ukrainian authorities have said that some 20,000 people from 52 countries have applied to join the legion. The numbers signing up abroad to fight in Ukraine, including army veterans residing in Britain, the US, and Europe, are swelling to form what could become the largest band of volunteers to fight in Europe since the international brigades participated in the Spanish Civil War. It has been formally dubbed the International Legion of the Territorial Defense of Ukraine by the Kiev government. Some European officials have welcomed the call and encouraged their citizens to volunteer. At least two officials, Latvian parliamentarian Yuris Juras and former Georgian Defense Minister Irakli Akurashvili, have led by example, personally traveling to Ukraine to join the war effort.
European Union governments will consider whether to impose an oil embargo on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine as they gather this week with US President Joe Biden for a series of summits designed to harden the West's response to Moscow. EU governments will take up the discussion among foreign ministers on Monday before Biden arrives in Brussels on Thursday for summits with NATO's 30 allies, as well as the EU and a Group of 7 G7 format, including Japan. President Joe Biden's warning of consequences for any aid China may give to Russia's Ukraine war effort could force Chinese President Xi Jinping to choose between a long-standing lucrative trade relationship with the West and a growing strategic partnership with Moscow. The details in this report by Nabil Khazini.
The rising tension between the West and Russia made China find itself in a difficult position to take a balancing stance. The conflict in Ukraine started only 3 weeks after Moscow and Beijing issued a joint statement outlining their deepening partnership and a shared vision for the global order. Since the outbreak of the conflict, China has supported a diplomatic resolution and a peaceful settlement of the Ukraine crisis.
We encourage all parties involved to engage in dialogue on an equal footing and to deal with the contradictions and problems accumulated over the years.
Economically speaking, a third of China's exports go to the United States and the European Union. This makes China's economic interests remain heavily inclined to Western countries. The West uses this to put pressure on China, warning the world's largest exporter of sanctions if it decides to help Russia.
We believe China in particular has a responsibility to use its influence with President Putin and to defend the international rules and principles that it professes to support. Instead, it appears that China is moving in the opposite direction by refusing to condemn this aggression while seeking to portray itself as a neutral arbiter. And we're concerned that they're considering directly assisting Russia with military equipment to use in Ukraine.
But targeting Beijing with a type of broad economic sanctions that have been imposed on Moscow would have potentially serious consequences for the United States and globally. Beijing has sought to present itself as neutral and signaled it could act as a mediator, but so far, China has struggled to navigate a path between its partnership with a rock-solid ally, Russia, and the huge Western condemnations of Moscow's military operation in Ukraine.
Thousands of people from all over Spain took part in a demonstration to demand a plan from the government to tackle the high costs and low profitability of the countryside and agricultural sectors. These problems have been compounded by the crisis in Ukraine.
Our food is costing us 6 or 7 times more than in the last 5 years. There is no one who can bear it. We cannot even afford it. The countryside is in an absolute state of disrepair. No one listens to us, and it doesn't matter which government is in power. We don't understand ideology. All we understand is work.
The first thing we are asking the government to do urgently is to remove taxes on diesel and petrol so that our products can reach markets faster and cheaper. More measures, more aid to the country, more flexible regulations, and not to forget our villages and our primary sector, which we only remembered at the time of the pandemic.
China Civil Aviation Administration of China, CAAC, said a China Eastern passenger jet carrying 132 people has crashed in southwest China and caused a mountain fire with casualties unknown. The jet involved in the accident was a Boeing 737 aircraft. An unverified video of the crash shared online shows huge plumes of smoke curling from the mountainsides near Wuzhou in Tang Country in southern China. In Hong Kong, local chief executive Carrie Lam announced that the country will resume international flights from 9 countries, including France, the United Kingdom, and the United States from April. Let's take a listen.
Firstly, during the 5th wave, 9 countries have been imposed circuit breaker flight ban, and this is no longer necessary because in these countries their situation is no longer worse than in Hong Kong, and most travelers returning to Hong Kong don't show any symptoms. If we continue the circuit breaker, it will be troublesome and worrisome for the large number of Hong Kong residents who remain in these countries, which we completely understand.
In Rwanda, the appeals court on Monday adjourned and postponed to April the 4th the hearing in which a verdict was expected in the case involving Paul Rasabyina, Calixiste Nasambimana, and 19 others. In a brief session, the president of the Court of Appeal, François Regis Rukunda Kuvuga, said that the court needed more than 30 days stipulated by the law to assess and render a verdict. Confirmation hearings begin Monday for Ketanji Brown Jackson, the federal judge President Biden has picked to fill Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer's seat when he retires this summer. Hossein Barkani has the insights.
Confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson begin Monday at the Capitol. If confirmed, she will make history as the first black female justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. President Biden has made his decision last month nominating Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, describing her one of the nation's brightest legal minds.
And it's my honor to introduce to the country a daughter of former public school teachers, a proven consensus builder, an accomplished lawyer, a distinguished jurist, one of the nation's most prestigious courts. My nominee for the United States Supreme Court is Judge Ketanji Jackson.
For her part, Judge Ketanji affirmed that it's an honor to serve the United States, describing it the greatest beacon of democracy the world has ever known.
Mr. President, I am truly humbled by the extraordinary honor of this nomination, and I am especially grateful for the care that you have taken in discharging your constitutional duty in service of our democracy with all that is going on in the world today. The United States of America is the greatest beacon of hope and democracy the world has ever known.
During the hearing, both Republicans and Democrats will launch challenging questions and harsh comments meant to rattle the nominee or throw her off course. Some of the toughest questions will likely come from Republicans, which will mostly focus on why Judge Ketanji should receive a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court.
U.S. officials have told the Reuters news agency that the United States has formally determined that violence committed against the Rohingya minority by Myanmar's military amounts to genocide, and crimes against humanity. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will announce the decision on Monday. The United Nations rejects Spain's declaration of support for the Moroccan autonomy plan as a solution to the conflict in Western Sahara. UN spokesman Stéphane Dujarric said that all parties involved in the conflict should support de Mistura's efforts aimed at resuming the political process. The United Nations stresses the importance of maintaining the full commitment of the parties to the political process they lead, in line with Resolution 2602/2021. The solution guarantees the right of self-determination for the people of Western Sahara within the framework of the provisions, principles, and objectives of the Charter of the United Nations. Eni and Sonatrach announced a significant oil and associated gas discovery in the Zemlet El Arbi concession located in the Bakin North Basin in the Algerian desert. The concession is operated by joint venture between Eni 49% and Sonatrach 51%. Preliminary estimates of the size of the discovery are around 140 million barrels of oil in place. To sports news, Xavi said that Barcelona side will take to savor their 4-0 win over Real Madrid yesterday, and he was proud of his players for imposing their personality in the Clásico at Santiago Bernabéu.
I am very proud. I'm very happy that Barcelona fans have to take advantage of this because lately we haven't had a lot of happiness, especially in the Clásico. And I insist that we said to each other that's the way to go. That's our project, and that's where we have to be. I think we have proven what we wanted very well. We have been much better than Real Madrid in its own stadium.
Jamal Belmadi, Algerian national team manager, and in the press conference of yesterday, he emphasized that the greatest and supreme goal for him and for all the Algerian people at this stage is to reach the finals of the international event. Algeria is facing Cameroon this week in outward meeting. So Jamal Belmadi's squad is traveling to Equatorial Guinea to prepare for the game and to be on duty. And before we wrap up, here is a reminder of today's top stories. Russia urges Ukrainian forces and the port city of Mariupol to lay down their arms and surrender in exchange for safe passage, but officials in Kiev immediately reject the offer. A shopping center in Kiev was left in ruins after being targeted by a Russian strike, killing at least one person. Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine, under an intense attack by artillery shells, mortar strikes, and bombardment from multiple launch rocket systems. Well, that's it for our news. Thank you for keeping it here on All 24 News with me, Karim Fazakri. Bye for now.